My name is Selbachny. I am the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Victims of abuse, in all its forms, verbal, emotional, financial, physical, and sexual, are often disoriented. They require not only therapy to heal their emotional wounds, but also practical guidance and topical education. At first, the victim is naturally distrustful and even hostile. The therapist or caseworker must establish confidence and rapport painstakingly and patiently. The therapeutic alliance between victim and therapist requires constant reassurance that the environment and treatment modalities chosen are safe and supportive. We call it a holding environment. This is not easy to do, partly because of objective factors, such as the fact that the records and notes of the therapist are not confidential and are accessible to the court and to the other party, the abuser. The offender can force their disclosure in court of law simply by filing a civil lawsuit against the survivor. The first task is to legitimize and validate the victim's fears. This is done by making clear to her that she is not responsible for her abuse and not guilty for what has happened. Victimization is the abuser's fault. It is not a victim choice. Victims do not seek abuse, although admittedly some of them keep finding abusive partners and forming relationships of codependence. Facing, reconstructing, and reframing the traumatic experiences is a crucial and indispensable first phase on the way to healing and recovery. The therapist should present the victim with her own ambivalence and the ambiguity of her messages, but this ought to be done gently, non-judgmentally, and without condemnation. The more willing and able the abuse survivor is to confront the reality of her mistreatment and the offender, the stronger she would feel and the less guilty. Typically, the patient's helplessness decreases together with the self-denial. Her self-esteem, as well as her sense of self-worth, stabilize. The therapist should emphasize the survivor's strengths and demonstrate how these and other assets can save her from a recurrence of the abuse or help her cope with it and with her abuser. Education is an important tool in this process of recovery. The patient should be made aware of the prevalence and nature of violence against women and of stalking, of the emotional and physical effects of abuse, warning signs and red flags, legal redress, coping strategies, and safety precautions. The therapist or social worker should provide the victim with lists of contacts, help organizations, law enforcement agencies, other women in her condition, support groups, domestic violence shelters, and online forums. Knowledge empowers and reduces the victim's sense of isolation and worthlessness. Helping the survivor regain control of her life is the overriding goal of the entire therapeutic process. With this aim in mind, she should be encouraged to re-establish contact with family, friends, colleagues, and the community at large. The importance of a tightly knit social support network cannot be exaggerated. It is important for the victim to understand that she is not alone, not an exception, not a freak. Ideally, after a period of combined tutoring, talk therapy, and anti-anxiety or antidepressant medications, the survivor will self-mobilize and emerge from the experience more resilient and assertive and less gullible and self-deprecating.